Did the evil necromancer come to your character's town, kill everyone, and turn them into zombies? Did the evil lich melt the face of your best friend? Did the vampire lord come and suck the blood of all the people in the town except your supervisor, so you had to still show up for work the next day? Well, Paizo, with the new Book of the Dead, has the archetype for you. It's called the Undead Slayer. And we're going to talk about it. So the first thing is to qualify for this. Anything in the Book of the Dead, we're just going to preface this right in the beginning. Anything in the Book of the Dead is focused on undead. So if you're taking one of these archetypes, either you're chatting up with your DM saying, hey, I really think this archetype is cool. It kind of fits with my character's kind of background and backstory. And they also have backgrounds in this book too. And hey, would this work in the game? Or you already know ahead of time that undead is a big part of the game, and you really have to, because all these are all the ones that I looked at so far were common, so you don't really have to worry about it. If you know your game's all about undead, take one of these archetypes. They're really cool. But as I said before in the beginning of the video, we're talking about the Undead Slayer, and it is a dedication, and the only requirement is you're trained in religion, which, like I said, if you're fighting undead, you're going to be trained in religion. You're going to pick that up somewhere along the line anyway. You kind of get a cool thing. So first things first, you get trained in 2 lore skills related to specific undead. So this is about a character who is specifically hunting certain types of undead. And obviously, a lot of these abilities work regardless of what kind of undead you're fighting, but this one gives you 2 extra lores about, like, I like to know about zombies and vampires. No, about liches and ghouls, and you really know about those specific ones. Also, if you already have a specific knowledge about a specific type of undead, this makes it expert. And you also gain the free action Slayer's Identification. Really cool ability. This one triggers the moment you roll initiative, and you can see an undead and clearly know it's undead. So if it's an undead, but that it's hiding the fact that it's undead, and you don't know currently that if it's undead, this is not going to work. You have to know that when you roll initiative, that you see an undead. Like I said, some of them pretty obvious, others not so much. And what it lets you do is that immediately when you roll initiative, you're allowed to make a recall knowledge check with a +1 bonus against that undead that you see. If you're master, that bonus goes up to a +2. So you get a free recall knowledge right in the beginning of combat. So you know what you're dealing with. Well, if you roll well, you know what you're dealing with, and potentially some of the weaknesses that you may not already know. The interesting thing about this ability is you get the +2 if the skill you're using is master level. And it doesn't tell you that you have to use a specific skill to make this recall knowledge check. So if you see something and it's clearly a zombie and you have lore zombies, you can make a lore zombie check on that thing. But if you see an undead, you go, I'm not familiar with what type of undead it is, but it's clearly undead. It's literally rotting in front of me. Then you can use your religion check, and maybe your religion check is a little bit higher, or maybe you focused on your lore skills and your religion check isn't so high, but you're not sure if your lores apply. So that's kind of interesting, where it kind of gives it a little bit of an open-ended kind of method of, it gives you 2 lores that are specific undead, but you're also going to be pumping up your religion skill as well. So depending on which skill you're using, you may get that +2, but you may get the +1 sometimes. Just like any dedication, it's available at level 2, and so long as you meet the requirements of being trained in religion, you can take this dedication. Also, it's a great fit if you're using the free dedication in your group. This is a great dedication, I guess, especially if you know that you're fighting undead for a prolonged period of time. Just like a lot of these other dedications, there is a variety of feats that you get access to as you level up, and there are 4 4th level feats. There's 2 6th level feats, an 8th level feat, and a 10th level feat. Now, the cool thing about this book as well is it not only gives you a little bit of kind of like understanding of what a undead slayer is supposed to do, and it's pretty obvious, it's supposed to be slaying undead, but it also gives you kind of how the undead slayers are viewed in the world, and specifically in different spots, especially places like Geb and Mizali in the Mwangi Expanse, places that kind of have a focus on undead, or maybe have undead as part of their society. you may be not looked at too kindly if you still go around killing undead if you're a openly a practitioner of the Undead Slayer organization or group, or even just if you're on your own, you're like, I'm an Undead Slayer. Okay, well, you're probably going to be first on the chopping block. But it's nice that they give you that little lore sidebar in the kind of second page of this dedication, where it kind of explains that there are certain nations, especially ones that are kind of go against Geb, that are more openly accepting of the Undead Slayers. But politically, they don't want to start a war, so it's kind of like, we're going to give this grant, and it just happens to be an Undead Slayer that wins it every time. Whoops, stuff like that. And it's kind of nice that they put that lore bit in there, and it's something that you definitely want to read up on if you're kind of spending time in that area of the world. We're not going to go over every single feat, even though there's not that many of them, because if you're really interested in this, I really want you to pick up this book, because this book has a lot of information for a player playing in a very undead-focused game, as well as a lot of stuff for the DM to use in a very undead-focused game. It's got a lot of lore. It's got a lot of options, items. It's a nice pickup. And like I said, we already reviewed this book. If you want to take a look at, if I point the right direction, if you want to take a look at our video right here, two of the really cool feats I saw for the Undead Slayer at level 4, and they have, like I said, they have 4 feats at that level they can pick. So there's a lot of competition here. And then, like I said, the two we're going to talk about here is Hunter's Sanctum is the first one, and the second one is Slayer's Strike. Slayer's Strike is pretty self-explanatory. I kind of will go over that one first. Slayer's Strike is similar to like power attack that you can get for a fighter, but specifically it does positive energy damage. It's a 2-action activity, and the only requirement is you have the Undead Slayer dedication, and if you don't have it, why are we talking? And it acts just like power attack. It acts as if you made 2 attacks for your multi-attack penalty, so any further attacks are going to be at a greater minus. You make a strike against a creature you know is undead. So you have to know they're undead to use this. So yet again, that recall knowledge during initiative, or maybe subsequent recall knowledges later on, maybe you didn't know they were undead and someone clued you in, that's important. So this won't work. You can't just guess. So you have to know that the target is undead before you pop them in the head with this, with the Slayer's Strike. And it says it counts as 2 attacks for a multi-attack penalty. If the strike hits, he deals 1 extra die of damage, using the same die, whatever weapon you're using. But this die of damage is positive damage. So this only this extra die of damage is positive damage. So the rest of the damage is whatever weapon you're using, is slashing, piercing, bludgeoning, whatever. But this extra damage is kind of like positive energy that you're using for, from your inner core of like hatred of undead. It just kind of pops out. After you make this attack, unlike power attack, you get a bonus to any subsequent attacks made against the same target equal to the number of damage dice. So if you have a weapon that does 2 damage dice, like 2d4 or something, your next attack is going to do 2d4 plus 2 positive energy damage. So you don't get the extra weapon die of damage on your further attacks that turn. And also, it says before your next turn. So this would actually include maybe attacks of opportunity that you would get if you have that feature, that feat from a variety of martial classes. If something triggers an attack off your turn, but it hasn't been your turn yet, you're still going to get this bonus. And as normal, positive damage only affects undead and creatures with a negative healing trait. So it's interesting with this feat that this one it's still 2 actions. So you're only going to have probably a 3rd action left. Like I said, maybe you're hasted, maybe you're quickened or whatever, what have you. But it still acts as if it's two attacks. So this is incentivizing you to attack again. So this almost incentivizes you to have an agile weapon to reduce that penalty down to 8. Maybe you're not even a fighter. Maybe you're a ranger and you picked a agile weapon, and your Hunter's Edge ability, you picked Flurry. So your penalty for making attacks with multi-attack penalty are much less. So, like I said, this ability, the Slayer Strike, that the fact that it incentivizes you to make another attack to get this bonus damage to whatever you're fighting. And most undead are going to be vulnerable to positive, and not all of them, but some of them may be vulnerable to positive energy. So this incentivizes you, but it's also to attack. So if you're using like a big greatsword or even a pick or something that's not agile, you're going to be at a -10, and that's a big penalty to deal with. But this incentivizes you to attack again. So you may want to pick things that help you by picking agile weapons, by picking abilities that reduce your multi-attack penalty. So it's kind of like throwing power attack on his head a little bit, because power attack really was a one and done for the most part. You could attack again, but it incentivizes you because you're getting an extra damage die based on the weapon. You're incentivized to get as big a die as you can. But this one is also incentivizing you to attack further times. So you might want to take a different weapon choice for this if you're picking Slayer Strike. The other one I think is cool. It's Hunter's Sanctum. And basically gives you a base of operations, which could be part of another structure. It basically gives you a hideout, and it has an ability of non-detection on it, that things that are undead that are trying to scry on you or find your location, it's protected against that, and also is protected against things that are trying to mundanely search out your sanctum. If they're trying to maybe spot that hidden door, or that that one bush that you always move aside and that you put it back in place, there's protection against that. So it actually uses your DCs for your skills to people to try to discover it, instead of just kind of random, like, oh, I tripped over that bush, oh, there's a hole in the ground, I found your sanctum. This kind of leads into this ability kind of leads into a couple other feats later on, which we can talk about. But I think it's a cool. You always think about the good guy who has their store of weapons in that one spot that they always go back to and kind of rearm themselves, which is something that actually can happen later. You establish a safe house where you can prepare for your hunt. The sanctum is roughly the size of a 20-foot cube. The sanctum is in a location you have access to and can be a part of a larger structure, such as a basement of a temple or hidden room in a library. Setting up or moving a sanctum requires a week of downtime. So it does take a while of downtime to say you're tracking down the vampire horde and they move to another city, or you've eradicated everything in this area and you want to move to another location. It's going to take a week of moving your stuff and making a new hiding place, a new sanctum. But your sanctum protects objects and people inside of it from magical detection and the prying eyes of the undead. It has the effect of non-detection, as I mentioned before, using your religion modifier as the counteract DC and half of your level rounded up. Additionally, undead attempting to locate the entrance from the sanctum via mundane perception must succeed at either a religion DC or your normal class DC to find the sanctum, whichever one is higher. So if, say, you're not focusing on religion as well, this really incentivizes you to focus on your religion proficiency. But say you're at a level where you're focusing on some of those extra lores, or you know that you're fighting vampires, so you're pumping in that vampire lore, and so maybe your class DC is higher instead of your religion DC. So you can use either one. But yeah, having a hideout, having a sanctum that is hidden from the prying eyes of undead, that's a cool concept that if really utilized, and if maybe you're a whole team of undead hunters and you all focus on different undead, so the zombies or the whites, that's one person's job, and the vampires and liches, that's another person that they are really knowledgeable about. So it'd be kind of cool to have almost like a SEAL Team 6 of undead hunters, and they all, and you all use kind of like the same sanctum to kind of gear up and plan your attack. All right, so now we've leveled to level 6. We're going to take, and we're only going to take, there's only 2 at level 6, so we're only going to take a look at one of them because it kind of harkens back to one of the ones I just talked about. The only requirement is that you have the dedication, so you don't even need that other feat, but you're going to get a benefit if you do. And Giro basically states is whether it's wooden stakes, holy water, or more unusual tools, you always have the right thing to handle the undead's unusual weaknesses and vulnerabilities. You gain the persistent planner and persistent consumable feats from the advanced player's guide. When using persistent planner, specifically to pull out items you need to deal with an undead weakness or vulnerability, you can pull out an item as a 2-action activity from your backpack instead of the usual 1-minute activity. So the idea is that persistent planner and persistent consumable feats are feats from the advanced player's guide that let you always had the right item for the right job. And you always, and you could spend basically a minute rummaging through your backpack and go, oh yeah, I forgot. I bought this thing that was useful, right? And then you bought it earlier. And basically you would expend the resources to buy it. If you had the money to buy it on your person, you're like, oh yeah, well I bought that earlier and I forgot about it and I just threw it in the bottom of my backpack, and then you were able to rummage through and grab it. So this says if you're using stuff specifically to fight undead and specifically to target a weakness of undead, it's only 2-action activity to kind of grab it out of your pack instead of having to spend a minute of taking your backpack off, rummaging through it, and then kind of, presenting the item. The other cool thing is if you have that feat we talked about before, Hunter's Sanctum. So the idea of these feats is it's assumed that you have access to stores and shops to kind of buy stuff. The idea is you went out and bought it before, you just forgot about it. If you have the Hunter's Sanctum feat, you can keep your Sanctum well stocked with the basics and spend 1 hour in your Sanctum refreshing your supplies in order to meet the requirements of the persistent planner, even if you don't have access to purchase goods. So in some instances, your GM's going to say, well, this kind of town is destroyed, or this town doesn't get incoming shipments, so there's really no place for you to buy stuff. So maybe they're relying on crafting feats and stuff like that for the players to keep themselves stocked with items that they need. In this case, the requirement is you have to buy stuff. So if you don't have access to buy stuff, but you have the Sanctum, you can kind of go to your Sanctum, and your Sanctum is stocked full of holy water and steaks and all the garlic and all the silver and things that you need to fight the undead, which is kind of cool.
The entity is still in there. Video surveillance shows a 16th century statue was destroyed. St. Dionysius the Areopagite.
Who wards off demons.
Exactly.
Perfect job for these babies. Made them myself. Holy water, clove leaves, silver shavings, white oak. The wicks.
The other 2 feats, the ones at level 8 and the one at level 10, do require you to have prior feats. And we're going to talk about the level 8 one because the level 10 one, we haven't talked about the prerequisite. So we're just going to go to the level 8 one. It's called Slayer's Blessing. And it requires you to have the Slayer's Strike from earlier. And what it basically says, you carry various materials and objects that are highly dangerous to undead and can apply them to your weapon. When you use Slayer's Strike, before making the strike, choose either the Ghost Touch property, so say you're fighting ghosts, you can use the Ghost Touch property rune, or a precious metal like cold iron, dark wood, or silver. Any strike that gets the positive energy damage from the use of Slayer Strike also gets the benefits of these materials or property rune. And if you're at 14th level, you can add adamantine and mithril to the list of available options. So this is really cool that if a specific monster requires silver or requires adamantine at higher levels, or some of these kind of other properties like cold iron or ghost touch, like I said, you're fighting ghosts or wraiths. This only amplifies your effect of your Slayer Strike and your positive energy damage. So whether you want to play a Hellboy or a Constantine style character, or you're playing in the middle of zombie land and you need to make sure you double tap. Or like I said, or any other game that focuses on fighting the undead, this is a great archetype for you. And like I said, there's even a couple more options, some utility options, some other options. I just picked the kind of the most interesting options to me, but it doesn't mean they're the right ones for you. But this has been Steve from Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed. May all your die rolls be crits, and may you always roll max damage. See you later.